we finally are able to get to the man on top of the food chain. So first and foremost, we thank you for this opportunity. We see your work reflected in your students who never fail to mention you. We see discipline, hard work, and podium placements, stunning international competitors, and changing our competitive reputation abroad. In life, we often see that the most silent man in the room proves to be the most crucial character. In this case, action does the talking. Now we have a chance for Coach Daniel Hilal to speak for himself.
Everyone knows that there's maybe 5 to 10% of the world is on the elite level of Jiu Jitsu. My goal is to get Lebanon into this very small percentage. Our belt standards are high because if they're not high, I don't think anyone in Lebanon will be able to reach this. I'm putting the standard not just on myself, but you could see it in my students as well. Everyone that trains with my students says that they're a belt level higher, but we're not aiming for the average, we're aiming for the elite level. And this is Fight Club Lebanon. My parents left during the war back in the 80s. I was born in LA. I was a fan of Bruce Lee ever since I was a kid. I liked all this kung fu stuff, the kicking and punching. When I was about 11, I started with karate. I started to get into different martial arts, and I started to leave the martial arts that I found weren't really effective. And I was drawn more and more towards the martial arts that were effective. I went from karate and this whole old school Japanese traditional martial arts, took me to judo. And then in judo, I liked its effectiveness. And then from judo, I went to Jiu Jitsu. And of course, I played a little bit with MMA in between that transition. Basically, I'm drawn to the most effective styles of martial arts. I only compete at very high level tournaments, the ones with the most athletes. For a while, I was only competing once a year. That's the black belt that I wanted to be. I've been throwing myself in these places with these people, with these competitors. I'm motivating myself by challenging myself at the highest levels. Me and my guys in Jiu Jitsu, or at least the Lebanese national team in Jiu Jitsu, we're competing at what's the equivalent of like UFC for MMA. That's where we're planning to stay. Something that a lot of people don't know is that when MMA first started in the region, it was the Jiu-Jitsu community that was promoting it. So for example, you had Jordan, you had UAE. The MMA promotions there, whether you had a Desert Force, ADFC or DFC at the time, they were all kind of Jiu-Jitsu based, more like clubs that were promoting their club, promoting their fighters. So it was already a step forward from the Jiu-Jitsu community. And they were looking for other countries around the world that have more of a striking base. Like you have Iraq, you have Lebanon. At first, they were trying to get those fighters that do a striking background, kickboxing, Muay Thai, boxing, karate. You have lots of Kung Fu people in the Middle East. They used to get these guys to fight their Jiu-Jitsu guys just to promote Jiu-Jitsu, to promote their training. And Lebanon was one of the targets because they knew at that time that there was no Jiu-Jitsu in Lebanon. And I was a victim of this. So I had an interest for Jiu-Jitsu, but like I said, I wasn't training with any coach or anyone at the time. I was just training as much as possible by myself, learning off YouTube, training with judo guys, training with wrestlers. I did a little bit of boxing, I did a little bit of Muay Thai. They knew that in Lebanon there wasn't Jiu-Jitsu, so when they started to select people, they were selecting people that don't know Jiu-Jitsu against people that know Jiu-Jitsu. And my Jiu-Jitsu level at the time was very much like a white belt. You know, I just knew the basic stuff. And they put me against a purple belt from Kuwait, and I was able to get a takedown, and I got caught in a guillotine. I was devastated because even though you feel you're better than someone, you can still lose the fight. This pushed me to train a little bit more Jiu-Jitsu because I was into MMA at the time. And I kept searching and searching for people to train with, some higher level, and I couldn't find this. Either I have to leave the country, or that's when I decided to bring it here.
Can BJJ be used in the real world?
A lot of people ask me, will Jiu-Jitsu help you in self-defense? If you want it to, it will. If you're not afraid to fight back, everything works. Any martial art you know kind of works. Self-defense, of course, has to apply to situations with weapons or situations you don't know if your opponent has a weapon. And of course, against multiple opponents, it's a different situation completely. So Jiu-Jitsu is obviously not effective against multiple opponents. But I believe one-on-one, unarmed combat, Jiu Jitsu is maybe one of the best ones just because the mistakes are the safest. people will always do mistakes. When you picture yourself fighting, someone that doesn't know any martial arts, their expectations are here, and in reality, they're probably somewhere here. You do a mistake, people that train a lot with knives, every time they do a mistake in training, it's as if their hand got cut off. It's not a mistake you can come back from. At least Jiu Jitsu helps you reset every time you do a mistake. You just need to move your hips a little bit, adjust the angle, and you're still back in the fight.
Why should BJJ be the base for MMA?
I don't know if it should be the only base. I know how important Jiu Jitsu is for MMA. Basically, you could finish the fight in one of two ways. You need to have a way of avoiding striking, and you need to have a way of avoiding submissions. If you want to survive, you need to know how to knock someone out. You need to know how to submit someone because you need to finish the fight. Other than that, your main weapon is going to be your cardio, your physical fitness, especially with all the doping that's happening. That's something that you can't really rely on. You're fighting people that don't have the same gas tank. Wrestling will help because it's going to help you dictate where the fight will go. Knowing how to box, knowing how to kick is as important as knowing how to submit someone. Learning how to block or counter striking is as important as submission defense. You need to have knowledge in both striking and grappling. It's easier to learn how to knock someone out than it is to learn how to submit someone. I just think Jiu Jitsu is a little bit harder, and that's why some people say it's a good base. Anything that you do at the high level is going to help you get there. If you wrestle at the highest level, you can do good in MMA. Jiu Jitsu is much harder to be able to submit someone than it is to be able to knock someone out. It's much harder to be able to defend submissions than it is to close the distance on a striker. Everything is equally as important when you're going to fight. These are all weapons you have. Yes, Jiu Jitsu is the longest and hardest one from all the martial arts used in MMA.
Nate Diaz, he always purposely gets on his back. Tell us about the ability to fight on your back.
The thing that separates, I think, the main thing that separates Jiu-Jitsu from other grappling arts is the fact that people fight off their back. If you have better Jiu-Jitsu than someone, that's always going to be a better place for you. Even though you feel you're in a dangerous position, the only time that's a bad position is when the person on top of you has equal or better Jiu-Jitsu, because they're going to neutralize your attacks and be able to pass your guard to get to a dominant position. So this is the hardest thing to learn in Jiu-Jitsu. The only time you enjoy it is when you have better Jiu-Jitsu than your opponent. But once you understand it, it's an ideal place against someone that doesn't know Jiu-Jitsu.
What's the difference between BJJ and wrestling or grappling?
Wrestling, your goal is to pin the person, put them on their back. Wrestling is a type of grappling. Jiu-Jitsu is a type of grappling. Judo is a type of grappling. You guys are clinched together somehow. Try to find a way to become a complete grappler. Being as good at takedowns as you would be in submissions, being as good as passing the guard as you are in defending throws, and vice versa. You know, you're gonna have to find a way to wrestle. You might need your grips from judo. Judo grips might help you in jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu groundwork will help you in judo. And regardless of what's the grappling style that you do, especially for MMA, I think you need to try to incorporate all the styles: wrestling, jiu-jitsu, with gi, without gi. They all help you.
What's the advantage of a BJJ fighter over fighters that don't have BJJ ground game?
When they're on the feet, there's no advantage whatsoever. When they're clinched together standing, if the person has no grappling experience, which would include wrestling, the advantage would go to a jiu-jitsu guy. But on the ground, it's basically as easy as it gets. If the person on top has no awareness of submissions or anything the person on bottom can do, I think wherever the fight goes on the ground, the advantage will always go to the jiu-jitsu fighter. And the only way to get awareness of jiu-jitsu is by training jiu-jitsu.
This is Fight Club Lebanon.